We're going to start soon. I think it's probably okay to go ahead and get started. We really appreciate you being here, and I'm excited to be here and to talk with you today about our topic. We've called our presentation Paso a Paso, Navigating Design Research at an Early Stage Startup. So we're here to sort of give you an overview of like who we are as individuals and our careers. Actually, Nanci, who is my co-presenter, she and I actually met on Techeria in the Slack community, which is really great, you know, as a way to like, you know, build community and get to know other people that are either already in the tech world or like trying to get into a role inside tech. I personally have found Techeria to be a great community to be a part of. So that's kind of why we're here, why we're interested in talking and sharing our stories. Nanci, do you want to say anything about yourself as an introduction?
I'm a senior UX researcher as well. And just to kind of like touch on what Maribel said about Techeria, I kind of turned to it as a space where I feel like I was always the only, like either the Hispanic or the only female in some of the spaces that I've been in tech. So I kind of was looking for a place of connections and to kind of see other people like myself, see how they're kind of navigating the tech world.
Thank you. Yeah. So we'll get started. All right. So animation. Here's an overview of what we're going to talk about today. Yeah. The first thing is that we're going to tell you a little bit more about Tendo, the company that we work for, and about design research, and really to highlight some things that we think are special about startups such as Tendo, and a little bit more about the design research process as well. Nanci is going to share her career story, which I think is a really interesting one, and then I will also go into my career journey, and towards the end we'll get into a few learnings that we've had since working at our company and open it up to questions. We'll try to keep it pretty informal at the end, and we're interested to hear what questions you have, like what you're trying to do as well, and we'll see how we can answer any of your questions. All right, so getting into Tendo and who we are. This is kind of like a little bit of a like why I think startups are really great. I think the nature of different startups is that a lot of them are mission driven. And so what you'll see here on this page is our mission. You know, we're on this mission to become the trusted connection between patients, clinicians, and caregivers. And so essentially what we do as a company is we're working to build software. And so with that comes like a platform for patients and their caregivers, clinicians. So that's kind of the world where we live in. It's in that digital health side, in that healthcare space. And I think it's been really great. This company is about 2 years old, if I'm remembering correctly. And we do have a lot of open roles. So the link is in here for anyone who wants to explore the types of roles that we have. Like we have everything from like engineering to more like business operations side of things. So if you are interested, I do encourage you to check out our open roles. All right, Nanci.
Thank you, Maribel. So in the past 2 years, there's been this like basically an explosion of digital health apps. I think something like the last number I've heard is something between like 250 to 350 health apps are added to app stores every day. And I think we all know what the biggest catalyst kind of has been for that shift, and that is the pandemic, where a lot of healthcare systems and people within those systems were forced to adopt digital health solutions to their workflows. So a digital health app, and if you can see the circle here, it can include anything that impacts the patient care journey, from diagnostic tools to surgical implantable devices. And what is probably most familiar to a lot of you here are like tools around telemedicine, telehealth, and logging in and seeing your doctor virtually. Tendo specifically sits in the health information area here, where that little asterisk. And this is things like digitized records, dashboards, and things like that. And so the health tech sector is, as I mentioned, it's growing pretty fast. And I think the last number I heard, it was by Grandview Research. It's like 1.3 trillion is the expected revenue growth by 2030. And so you can go to the next slide, Maribel, please. Okay. And so why UX and health tech? Why is this a thing? So we know that UX has a potential to improve everyday life. We good user experience. It's big across all types of industries. We expect that's the bare minimum. We expect a good user experience when we download an app or buy something. So whether it's online media, transportation, education, it's the healthcare industry's turn to kind of fall in line with that. And in reality, that's kind of scary to be a part of, but it's also super, super exciting. And to me, the scary part is that we are affecting a lot of lives here. We're involved with like patients, caregivers, clinicians, and they're all ready to see a change in this UX around healthcare. And even when you're a professional in healthcare, sometimes you don't know where to go to with your questions, or maybe you're facing some sort of difficulty. You don't know where to go, and this is something that improving the user experience can change. We can make access to healthcare easier, less overwhelming, and overall equitable. And I think all those challenges make the health tech space ripe and ready for change. And how are we doing that? And we are taking thinking. Maribel, if you want to go to the next slide. So this is close. This is a visual by the Nielsen Norman Group. This is close to how we do, or I guess our design process model at Tendo. There are lots of other design frameworks out there, but this one most closely aligns to how we're currently working. In order to be successful in any space with whatever it is that you're making, you need to understand the problems of your users flat out and how those problems affect their experience. And in every phase that you see here, there's design research to be done in every step of the way. And design research also informs product strategy. Just to kind of talk through an example here, for the empathize and the define phase here, we spend a lot of time talking to patients, caregivers, clinicians, non-clinicians, to understand their needs. And in the ideate and prototype phases, we spend time validating the ideas that we came up with before they get built. And then once they're built, we test them out, and then they get implemented. And even when they're implemented, they're not fully done. We're still learning. And so we're learning on how to improve things, and we iterate, and that's why that arrow goes all the way back to empathize. And we're kind of going through the whole process in bits and pieces again. And my career journey. So my journey into design research. So kind of just to give a little bit of a backstory, I am first-gen Mexican-American. I'm not just first-gen American-born, but also the first in my family to graduate from high school, to graduate from college. I got my degree in visual design communications. In my design education, it was super traditional. It was very hands-on and tactile. And what I mean by that is that we did a lot of print work, drawing, illustration. And right at the end of my program, I decided that I wanted to get into web design. And I'm glad I did, because that ended up being how I ended up taking on kind of like how I moved into sort of the future roles that I took on. So I worked in print, web design, and then eventually transitioned into consulting in the UI UX, and eventually I ended up in healthcare. And kind of to step back a little bit, my jump from the financial space to the healthcare space was very intentional. I was not happy in fintech. I was pretty bored by the end of my time in fintech, and healthcare seemed like a logical step for me. It seemed like a much more interesting space. There was lots of challenges in it, and my assumptions turned out to be right. So I went to work at Jefferson's Digital Innovation and Consumer Experience Group as a design researcher there, and that pretty much led me to where I am today at Tendo. And now Maribel.
All right, so thank you, Nanci. Yeah, I think one of the things that I find interesting about Nanci's story is that we both kind of share like a similar a cultural background. I'm also Mexican American, and I've heard this before at another conference, but I don't consider myself half like Mexican, half American. I consider myself 100% Mexican and 100% American, so I'm 200%. And I try to like keep that in mind in whatever I'm doing, because I know that as the first in my family to try things, there's like a lot of expectations and a lot of like you're being watched, I guess. And so I always keep that in mind, because I am the first in my family to go to college, graduate from high school, like similarly to what Nanci was saying, first, but certainly not the last. And so yeah, I too kind of just when I went to college as the first person in my family, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that there were these expectations, and at the time I really was interested in medicine. I thought I might go into pursuing a medical career as a physician. That was kind of something that I thought would make my family proud, would like really build on my interest and curiosity, like for science and for like the natural world. I was always really interested in biology. So when I was in college, I went to school in North Carolina. So even though I didn't get to say this earlier, but I live in San Francisco now, in California, I grew up in North Carolina. I grew up in a small town. And so that was kind of like a big deal for me to go to college. And so I was studying biology at UNC Chapel Hill, which is the flagship university there. A lot of people get into medicine. It's a big like medical hub. Duke University is also a big medical hub as well. And so that was kind of like my environment in college. So I was very interested in either medicine or research. So that's kind of like how I started. Like I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I thought like that was the path for me. And so what I ended up doing after college was like, I tried a lot of different places that were in that space. So in the medical side, public health, I started learning about like public health careers. I thought that was really interesting because it brought in the social side of health, which to me was always like, at the end of the day, like people, like their experiences, their lived experiences and how that affects health, like is super important, like these social determinants of health, which is why like I was really interested in public health. And so this just kind of shows like I was on that track. I thought I wanted to do more like health policy type of work. I went to, I got a master's degree in public health at UNC Chapel Hill again. And I had this like experience working at the Public Health Institute. I worked at Kaiser, and eventually I worked at UCSF, and I was part of a group called Solve Health Tech. And so basically that gave me my first exposure to research in like the digital health space. Even though I was in San Francisco and like was exposed to like tech bros all the time, I kind of like ignored it. But then it wasn't until I started working at UCSF that I was like, well, maybe this is something that I could have an impact in, and that would align my interest in like, being naturally curious and having a passion for like talking to people. I'm like a very people-oriented person. So I learned about user experience research while I was at UCSF. And I got to do a lot of different projects in the academic side. So at the time I was thinking like, well, how do I translate like everything that I've done into a user experience role? Like, how do I really get into this field in a way that's like less academic and more product facing, I guess, and how to like really make an impact. So this piece here, like the community piece, like I cannot emphasize this enough. This is kind of like where I started to think like, okay, I need to reach within like who I know, and try to, talk to people as much as I can. So I did take a course in UX design through General Assembly. So a lot of these boot camps are out there. I did take one. I did find it useful. I also did coaching. I had a career coach that I found also through Techeria. So I worked with her for 3 months just to sort of like help me transition and help prepare me for like applying for these roles. And then I also did a lot of informational interviews. which I found through Taqueria, or I would go on LinkedIn and just like message people. I got to talk to Nanci in this way because someone that I had done an informational interview tagged me in a comment on Taqueria. So that's how I was introduced to Nanci. So this community piece was really important to me in bridging like my past experience to where I am now. And so at the end of the day, like I think what we want to carry to you all here is that you can get to user research or UX design from any field. Like you can come from healthcare. I came from academia. I'm like a recovering academic. You can come from design like Nanci. I also do a little bit of communications work as well. So whatever you're coming from, I think like that mindset to like be analytical and to take your learnings from people that you interview, that you talk to try to understand their problems, like you can get to UX. So that's all I'll say about that. Yeah, and I will get into some of our learning. So I'm going to do my top 3 learnings since working in the field or like working at the startup that we're at now. And then we'll answer some questions. I know that there's questions here in the chat, and so thank you for that. So yeah, for our learnings, for me, one of the things was that teaching is like really part of the role. As someone who does user experience research, I do find myself kind of explaining things and teaching others about what we do, not only at our company, because at our company, we do have a lot of people that come from different worlds, different fields. And so sometimes user research is new to them. I mean, it was certainly new to me like 3 years ago. So I do think that like that's something that I try to do, and that's really valued as part of the role, and being able to teach people about what you do and explaining things to them patiently. So that's definitely part of it. And then another thing that I'd say is like that I've learned is to really embrace things that are ambiguous. At startups, it can be like not everything is well defined yet. There's not like policies and procedures for every single thing. So you're kind of in that space where like you're starting to define a few things. You're starting to set the frameworks for the future people who come after you. So I think I've really had to like embrace the unknown in this way, but I think this sort of comes with the territory, and it reminds me a lot of how many of us who are first generation are the first to do things. And so we, kind of have to figure things out on our own. And I think it's okay that we don't know all the answers. We know that we can, definitely have tools and resources like the internet to search for things, and we can be resourceful in that way. And I think that's something that like I carry from my upbringing, is that like nothing was really defined for me. And so I think if I wanted to do something, I had to figure it out. And I've always tried to embrace the unknown, which I think is like really important to keep that in mind if you do consider working at a startup. And the third thing for me is an appreciation for the digital health space. It's so new and it's really exciting, which means that there are a lot of big challenges. So I find this really exciting, and I do appreciate like the different, sort of like the different limitations that might exist. We know that healthcare is very complicated, and it's not just about the technology. It's also policy. It's also psychology and people's behaviors and access to resources. It's you're dealing with like all these social issues that are part of like our bigger society. But I think what it's given me, like since working here, I've like really appreciated how industry is trying to drive forward solutions and kind of create a space for solutions and like make things a little bit more accessible to people. All right, Nanci.
Okay, so a startup is a great place to cultivate a growth mindset. And I was a little hesitant. It feels kind of like obvious, but I had to think back to how I ended up where I ended up and how my thinking was at kind of like the beginning of everything. So in a startup setting, a growth mindset is a must-have. You have to believe in the potential in around you, the potential in what you're designing, building, whatever. And personally, I had never heard the phrases growth mindset, fixed mindset, and scarcity mindset until after I was done with my schooling. And I think hearing that phrase, I heard it right at the right time, because if you can picture this to kind of just set up, I had just graduated college during the Great Recession with a degree that felt useless to me at the time. It felt so useless to have a visual design background during the Great Recession. And I had just moved back to my hometown too, which was a city that literally was just named the poorest city in America. So everyone around me was struggling. And after like listening to this podcast and hearing growth mindset, fixed mindset, scarcity mindset, I thought, wow, I'm really letting my current circumstances kind of cloud my worldview. But after embracing this mindset and kind of like inviting it into my life, it flipped a switch in me. It helped me look at what I did have and understanding that this is the foundation I have right now, and how can I build upon this? And that question and that mindset has led me to where I am today. And I still repeat that question to myself. I asked myself, like, okay, this is what I know now, and this is what I want to know, and how can I fix this gap? And I think a startup, not only a startup, but also design research is a great place to be if you consider yourself curious, a lifelong learner, flexible. If you're someone that's always looking to build new skills, like a startup is a great place to kind of start that. And so the next one, UX, this one too was a surprise. Research can be creative work. And I think when people hear research, the last thing that comes to mind is creativity. And at least for me, that's kind of what I would have thought if you would have asked me that a few years ago. But surprisingly, there's a lot of ways in which we apply creativity to design research. When we're synthesizing tons of data, we're connecting disparate pieces of information. We're looking for patterns. When we're sharing back our research, we're considering storytelling. How are we going to tell the story of what we learned? What visuals are we using? And also when we are going about our research itself, sometimes there's a need to repurpose the tools, methods that we have in a new way. And also improv. There's lots of improv, especially when we're interviewing people. You can write out the most pristine like interview guide, but because you're talking to a human, you're talking to a person, you can't predict every outcome going to say. You kind of have to sometimes go off the cuff a little bit there. And I think it's important to call out that research can be creative, because there might be some people that have the misconception that research is just spreadsheets, it's just Word docs and peer-reviewed articles, but it's so much more than that.
And this is like one final kind of piece of guidance wherever you are. Not just in a startup, but I guess like wherever you are, like you do have an ability to impact, whether it's a product or whether it's like the sector that you're working in. I think like that's important. So we did want to emphasize this piece in particular for our work at a startup, because we do find that like, we're in this, we're really lucky. I consider myself really lucky to be in this space where I have the ability to impact a product. And I've never worked at like a big tech company, so I don't know what that's like, but I would say that like, this feels like, it does feel like we're having an impact, and like we're in a position where like we're learning new things all the time and able to directly apply our learnings to what we do next. It's very iterative. It's a continuous cycle of improvement. And I think that's the kind of culture that we're in right now. And I really like appreciate that. All right, so that's kind of the end of the presentation portion. You can find us on Slack. These are our handles for the Slack community. We're always happy to connect there, as well as LinkedIn. I was gonna maybe turn to some of the questions or some of the chat. I see a lot of people in here, so I really appreciate it. Nanci, is there a question that you might want to answer now? Or if others have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A.
So Allison asked a good one. If we've heard of people transitioning to research from SE. I'm assuming that's software engineering. And I would say, yes, a lot of the thought leaders we have today, or people that are like, I can't think of any off the cuff, but a lot of the people that kind of like write books on UX research, quite literally write the books on it, are people that originally came from the software engineering space, and became thought leaders. And that's because they were in that role building software, and they saw that need, that gap that needed to be addressed to make the products usable, and they were the champions for that. And so, yeah, I've heard of that. I probably have worked with maybe one or two people that have come from software engineering or an adjacent space to that and moved into UX.
Yeah, I was just trying to think if I knew any. I don't think I know of any personally, but I do feel like that would be a strength, actually, to come from that kind of background where you know everything that a software engineer knows, and then being able to apply it in a research context. I think it would be an advantage, but I can't think of anyone in particular right now. So thank you, Nanci, for your answer. Yeah, Marco Lopez was saying curiosity and flexibility is so important, and yeah, it's so true. Flexibility, curiosity, really important, as well as a growth mindset. So Monica has a question about how do you differentiate between UXR and UX designer? Nanci, do you want to try to take that one on?
Yeah, I can. So I actually was a UX designer before I transitioned fully to research. And UX design, there is some research in that, but honestly, I wasn't as in the weeds with like doing surveys, doing hardcore usability studies. I kind of would, I would make my mocks, wireframes, prototypes, and kind of do some user testing, but I didn't understand the nuances or like the things that you had to keep in mind when you're questioning someone. But as I moved kind of forward in my UX journey, I decided that the research stuff was way more interesting. So I felt like I was a generalist, like a UX generalist, and I kind of I decided to pursue research or like focus on it, and that kind of has led me to learning more about all these different research methods on how we ask questions, and basically like users are learning from our users is like a big focus of mine. I think UX design, you keep the users in mind, but I don't think the focus is exactly on like talking to them and keeping them centered 100% in your work, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think to me, like, that answer is really good. That answers the question pretty well. I've kind of always seen UX research as like a specialty, or like something that you can specialize within UX design, where you can get really deep about like methodologies. You can like, this is survey development, and it can get like really into the weeds. Whereas I feel like a UX designer kind of like has a wide breadth of knowledge on things. Like they have an understanding of research, they have an understanding of design principles, they can push the pixels, but maybe like their knowledge of UX research doesn't go as deep. But again, I think like, because the space is new, some UX designers, they might end up doing quite a bit of research, and we're fortunate at our company that we have designers that specialize like in product design, and so we don't worry so much on that side of things, because we have great people that are like doing the best, like bringing their expertise in and like really helping us get our designs pushed forward. So there are some companies where like there's like a UX designer and they do everything, but we're lucky that we get to specialize.
Mm-hmm. There's a question that is back, Gabriella. Sorry, we almost missed it. What are some of your day-to-day responsibilities as a UX researcher? And I think that I can speak to what we kind of do right now, but it does vary at the size of like the company that you're at might impact that. I'm not also like the focus of your product or whatever that you're doing research might influence that. But we do a lot of research operations at a startup where we're kind of setting up processes and workflows. We look at vendors, tools that might like help make our job easier, something that we do. And I don't imagine I would have done that at a bigger company. And also we do the user research in itself, where we're talking to patients, clinicians, and we do a lot of the stuff around those interviews that happen, as well as usability testing too. And again, that changes, it shifts like depending on what it is that we're focusing on. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that's good. Yeah, we collaborate with a lot of people too. So I think that's a big part of the job. Like in any given day of the week, we'll have meetings with our cross-functional teams. And so typically I feel like we meet with like different people within the product side. So product managers, we'll talk to them. We definitely have our own team meetings as well. And our team consists of like UX research. We have someone that is a director of strategy, and then we have product designers. So we have those meetings within our team, and then also meetings with other people. And then one thing that's interesting about our company too is that we have like a group of people that a team essentially that like interacts with like the health systems that we eventually, will roll out our product with. And so they're kind of like the liaison between us, the company, and the end user. So people like the clinicians and the patients. So we have that group of people that like really understands like those health systems and they're like, every day like working to talk to them. So there is a lot of cross-functional collaboration, lots of meetings, I guess, as well. So that is something that's part of our world. And then it's also, listening to recordings and writing up different summaries and really just trying to like work with people. I think that's a really big part of it, is that collaboration with other people. And we're all virtual. Our company is all virtual. So we do a lot of like Zoom meetings and try to build up those relationships virtually, which can be hard, but that is part of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and we have Jimena here with a good question. Could you go deeper into what motivates you to be part of a startup? I guess for me, it is the lifelong learner part. I think Maribel, you said something too, like it kind of seemed like a natural transition when you're a curious person. You're always looking to learn new things, building skills. And I think, I don't want to say that all startups are that way. It depends on the culture. But a lot of startup cultures might kind of give you that space to be able to stretch out different skills, because we might not have someone in that role quite yet. But they're open to you trying, a thing from, say you want to try out like illustrating something. We don't have an illustrator right now, so maybe you'll take that on, you'll try illustration, and just to try it out to see if you like it. A startup might give you the space to try out like these new things, and that can be fun and interesting way to like learn new skills. Maribel, is there anything?
Yeah, I like this question because I also this is my first nonprofit or academia job. I've always worked at a nonprofit. Like starting from my first job, I used to be an organizer at an environmental justice organization in North Carolina. So it was very like environmental justice, canvassing, advocacy, policy. So that's kind of where I started. And then like really before this job, I was working at like either academic institutions or like NGOs. So the thing that motivated me is, honestly, I was kind of tired of being underappreciated in the roles that I had. And the NGOs, they're good. Their missions are always solid, and I'm a very mission-driven person. But I think what like really like helped me see a path in UX research is that I felt like I could do it. I felt like I had the skills. And then also I felt like I could also be appreciated more and have an impact and maybe see fewer, like I would feel like I could move my work faster and really grow my career, because I felt like, a lot of times when you're working at an NGO, the work that you're doing is for the long haul, and you might not see change happen for a really long time, because academic institutions are really big ships, and like it takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort to move them in any direction. You're moving like very slow incremental change, and I think that's what motivated me, is that like that I could make more of an impact in a faster way. And then I also wanted to be appreciated. I also wanted to feel like my contributions mattered, and that I was financially like compensated what I felt like I was worth, truthfully. So that's kind of why like I was motivated to get into the field. David has another question about who do we look up to in the UXR space? Currently looking for people. I guess I would want to find more people that like look like me in the field. So I can think of 2 people right now. They're not Latinas or Latinos. So I would love to see people in this space more. But the people that I currently look up to, there's someone in Europe. I don't know what country she's in, but she is part of the User Research Academy. Nanci Anderson always puts out really great resources about user experience research. And then lately I've been like really interested in Google's product inclusion team, like really their whole team. But I do have a book by I'll pull it up here because I have it in front of me, but Annie Jean Baptiste. I think she comes from the product space. I don't think she's a researcher, but what I appreciate is like the role in product inclusion and thinking about like equity and design. So this is kind of like the author of this book is like who I look up to, but would like to look up to more people as I keep learning more. I don't know, Nanci, if you have anyone that you look up to right now.
So it's funny, I saw that question and I immediately had to like look over at my books. I don't know if I'm saying this right, Tomer Sharon, I believe he's formerly of Google. He's been at part of a ton of companies, but he's actually someone that me and Maribel will like things from the books that he's written. And then Steve Portigal, he wrote an amazing book on like interviewing users. It's a short book, but it's like it covers everything logistically from like planning your interview and also how to like handle sort of like awkward situations and things like that. But he's had a few good books, and also I think he has a good Twitter presence. I think he's the one that he's on Twitter. And then there are people like Laura Klein. Laura Klein and Erica Hall, I find interesting. I know that sometimes some people think her Just Enough Research book is controversial. Some people don't agree with everything in that, but I really like her because I feel like she's always been kind of like a fighter, and also like a kind of like a person that fights for justice in products or across different products. But those are the 4 that come to mind for me.
Oh, that's awesome. And that like actually ties back to a question about books or websites that you recommend. So Nanci, you feel free to like type in any of the books that you mentioned. I feel like that just like went over my head, but I know you're the people that you mentioned were like people that I look up to. I think the newsletter that's called The Biweekly is a good one. This is by Nanci Anderson, and I'll type it in the chat as well. But yeah, there's definitely a lot. And actually, I will say that I go to Techeria a lot, and like I check out the channels because I do think that people are like constantly sharing resources. I know it seems like a lot because there's like 1,000 posts every day, but every now and then I do check in there and I see like the different tools that people are recommending, and if it's like meetups and stuff like that, like that will sometimes come up. So yeah, for starters, definitely user research academy is a good one for me. There's a question about what is the relationship between customer success and researchers in startup environments. I think that's pretty good. Nancy, do you have any advice on this?
Is this kind of tying back to our customer engagement people and how we work with them?
I think it might be a little bit of both. I don't think we have,
Yeah.
I guess they would be the equivalent of a customer success team.
Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to think how to answer this. So there definitely is a relationship there, and there needs to be a sort of a channel for communication, just because they have knowledge or an understanding of the goals of the customer through the lens of the customer. And for us, we're like very much grounded in the patient experience, in the clinician, non-clinician's experience. We're very, very like human. And I don't want to say that we don't think of the business lens, but we try to like humanize a lot of sometimes we get these like these concepts that come back to us, like we need to move these numbers or these, and we kind of have to like think how or translate them to how we work or how we think along the voice of the patient. Maribel, do you want to add?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And then there are also like, I feel like there's a bridge with them where we try to like collaborate with them whenever possible, because for us, the way that we work is that they're kind of like, they're the people that like really understand like the customer the best. And I think it's important that they have those relationships, and then that way it doesn't ever feel like we're asking too much of the customer. For instance, we will sometimes need to access patients through our customer, and we need to rely on those relationships with our customer engagement team to tell us like, hey, it's okay to reach out to them. And with COVID, I think this is an issue that has come up a lot, is that like health systems are overwhelmed with work, and there's like burnout, there's like all this kind of negative stuff impacting clinical workers or like health leaders. So I think it's important that they are there to help us like understand like what's an appropriate level ask, like how much time can we ask of people, like how do they recommend that we engage with whether it's patients or clinicians, because they're our key to them, and we don't want to do anything to like overwhelm clinicians even more or overwhelm patients even more. So I think that's why it's really important to keep that relationship and make sure that it's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Nancy, for adding notes about the resources. I'm looking to see if we have any other questions that we may have missed. I think we got to all of them, maybe. If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And I'm really liking the plus ones on the resources too.
Mm-hmm. Slack is a great place to go. There are lots of mixed methods is another group.
Mm-hmm.
There's mixed methods. Let me look real quick. The learners community is okay. The Slack channel isn't as active. And then there's also a research operations Slack channel. It's called Research Ops. And I feel like there's a lot of super senior people there, which I think is interesting, because sometimes some of these Slacks are kind of full with like traffic from like junior people trying to get into different roles. But the Research Ops has a lot of super like seasoned people that are kind of happy to answer questions that you might have about things. And let me see if there's anything else I missed. I think those are the groups.
Yeah, I would say there's nothing like experience too. Like it's always good to refer to like these tips and everything. But I've definitely learned a lot through experience. Just what you mentioned earlier in the talk, Nancy, about like even when you have like the best plan, like sometimes you do have to like um, improvise when you're talking to your interviewees. You know, like you might have like the questions perfectly written out and like in the order that you want them. But when you get to the day of, like sometimes like the conversation goes in a little bit of a different way. So I think that's yeah, just having the lessons from direct experience is nice too. Yeah, and I like personally, I do like talking to people. So I think each conversation is different, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a good question from Jasmine. Are there any self projects people can do to get started?
Oh, for sure. There are so many industries out there that are not, there are kind of healthcare where they're lagging in like a nice user experience. And I kind of, I don't know if I should like say this, but if you want to work on a side project, make sure you're not doing something like reskinning Spotify. Like make sure you're actually solving like a problem. I've seen a few projects like that, and it's a product that's pretty well designed, and they just kind of like change colors or change like the width. It's a more of a design, like an over like a redesign or reskinning. It's not necessarily addressing a problem with the product itself. So just keep that in mind when you are picking up your projects. But there are lots of projects out there. You can look at like nonprofits. What does their website look like? Or government websites are so bad. Every time I have to help my mom or my parents with something, I'm like reminded of like how slow they are, how terrible the form design is, or like sometimes some things are so like dated where like you have to wait for a letter, you have to wait for something that's kind of that makes the process more manual or more time consuming. So like kind of pay attention to those things that you have to deal with, or like the things that the problems that are around you, and the projects that they don't have to be like these beautiful like visual masterpieces. You can do mappings. That's just as interesting in a design researcher like portfolio, like seeing the thought that goes into it, like, you know, laying out like a flow, a new flow, or proposed like workflow or things like that. There's a lot of things that a lot of deliverables that you can design around a design problem.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to like look for problems that you see out in the field. I think there's free courses too. Like there's like University of Michigan like has like a UX design course. I think UC Berkeley might have like online stuff. And certainly Google has like a UX design course where they like you can do a project on your own. So that could be good because then you have like an outline, like a course outline, and you like know that, okay, this comes first and then I do this. So that could be a good way to do something like through one of those courses to like help provide a little bit more structure if you're uneasy about like just like finding something random on the internet and like, you know, trying to solve a problem. Maybe going through that, because that's how that was a big benefit of doing a UX design course for me, is that like it forced me to pick a problem and to try to research it and to create like a solution. So because the course was like UX design, I did do a little bit of prototyping. I actually use like Adobe XD, which I know everyone hates. But you can do it in Figma, you can do it in whatever tool that you like. And it was really ugly, honestly. But what it did help me do is like find people to talk to, and you know, have a way for me to like ask questions, develop a guide, ask questions, like learn from it, and then like use that to inform like my ugly prototypes, right? So that's what I did like to get started. I used like the structure of like an existing course. I did want to get to a question from Martin about having 18 years of FQHC work, and FQHC is, yes, so Diego answered it, Federally Qualified Health Center. So this is a place for, it's generally considered a safety net. So when you have, either you don't have insurance or you don't have like quite enough insurance, maybe it's, or you have like Medicaid or Medicare, like you can be seen at these at a federally qualified health center, and there's such a range of them. Like I actually interned at one in Durham, North Carolina, and it was actually, they offered a lot of services. So what they offer can like be really robust, but typically it's people that are on the lower income side of things. So they have like a unique set of challenges, but at the end of the day, they like optimize for high quality care without having like a lot of extra costs. So you're not going to get fancy PET scans, or like you're not going to get like all this like extra stuff maybe that you would see like at a different health center, but they're really good. So the question is that they recently pivoted to UX design, and do they have a chance anywhere? I would say yes. And I would use that as your superpower too. Like that experience of working directly like where the people are, and like I am sure that you have like a much better understanding of like the issues that everyday people face, like as like part of your strength. Like that's, I think that's your superpower. So definitely like in the healthcare tech sector, like I feel like that's where you especially like would have a lot of value to add, because I know like Medicaid especially and Medicare, they're like looking to like, you know, bring healthcare like into the century, right? And to incorporate more tech. There's a misconception that like older people don't want technology, but I think that like they do want it. Is the short answer is that like people that have been ignored by big tech previously, like they want like the nice stuff too. They want the technology. They want to be able to track their health, and they want guidance too. So I think like finding the ways to like best reach this group of people would be great. And there's probably like a lot of companies that are working on that. So can't think of any right now except for H4. I think there's a health tech for Medicaid company. Health tech, I'll type it out. That's really trying to bring health technology to traditionally like, you know, underserved groups.
And I want to add to that too. I don't know exactly what your, Martin, I don't know what your resume or your skills look like exactly, but something that might help is kind of like doing a skills inventory audit on yourself. Like, these are the things I do every day. I'm talking to people every day, or maybe you're doing things like you're designing like flyers or handouts, or maybe think of all the little things you do. Look and identify those skills, and then look up your dream job, your UX design dream job description. Look up the words they're using, the skills they're looking for, and then see if there's like a direct translation from what you're doing today to that role. And then also look at the gaps that you have, and then think like, oh, is there something that I could bring from UX design from this job description into what I'm doing today? Maybe like a UX design description says like, I'm trying to think of an off the cuff example, but see what you can bring, what sort of roles or responsibilities that you would see in a UX design job. See if there's anything that you might have space for to bring into your current role. So that way it builds out your resume, your skills, and also, like I said, use that language that the UX design job is using, because sometimes you're doing like literally the same thing, you're just using a different word for it. But the applicant tracking systems are they can be kind of prejudiced sometimes, where like they'll scan your resume, they don't see these words, and you might not be flagged as like a candidate that really fits that role. So just make sure that you're kind of matching up what you can do with what the job description is, and looking up these dream jobs and those skills and trying to match them up.
Yeah. Yeah, trying to find something that fits like UX design as opposed to like product design too might be helpful if you're searching for positions. Because from what I've seen, product design roles, like they might have like different expectations where they like really want you to pixel push and like have like 3, 4, 5 years of experience doing that. So it might be harder to get into like those highly specialized, like I like and nonstop designing all day, every day kind of thing. But like maybe roles that are like include things that are on the research side and like design side. So like both things. So it doesn't feel like you're like, you know, only doing that one thing, especially as you're starting out. That might be helpful. But I really like Nanci's advice about like trying to find like your dream job, seeing what they're asking for, and like finding ways that you fit that. Because I think the biggest barrier sometimes, like ourselves, like we kind of limit ourselves, or we think that we might not be able to do it because it just seems like, oh well, I only meet like half of the job description. Like the job descriptions are always like they ask for too much, I think. Like it's really hard to like ever find someone that meets 100% of the job description. Like those people are like unicorns. They're like really rare. You don't really find them. But if you feel like you meet most of them, like you know, apply, and like, you know, it's all about the fit. So yeah, I think Nanci's advice is pretty good. There's also advice to connect with other founders. 90% of the time, they also want to help or share their learnings. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and there's a lot of like AngelList has a lot of startups listed as well. So it's always interesting to start your search there too, because they're looking for people that are go-getters, and like if that comes across, like I think that'll help a lot too. People that are like really excited about what role they're pursuing what role they're pursuing. I think that goes like such a long way to show excitement. Thank you, Eve. Yeah, thank you, Marco.
Thank you.
And Martine. I'm sorry, I'm like anglicizing your name. It's just like
yeah, I'm doing that too.
I always do that with my name too. My name is like, I always say I'm Maribel, but like I'm Maribel. So it is hard to turn that off sometimes. Well, thank you all. Thank you so much for staying with us for like an hour. Yeah. Like that's really awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, feel free to reach out to us if you guys, you know, have some more questions or want any direct, you know, if we can help you in some way, just feel free to reach out to us.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. This is recorded. I think Hopin, if you register for Hopin, they will provide like the replay later, so you'll be able to access everything from the conference. Oh, Marty. I'm just like looking at the words. Yeah, I get called so many things sometimes. My name, I don't think my name is that hard, but yeah, it's a struggle. Oh yes, Techeria YouTube as well. It's going to be on there. Thanks everyone. I am going to sign off, but I really appreciate you all. Thank you for coming, and we are happy to connect after. Thank you.
All right. Bye.